The radio telescope in Puerto Rico had been listening to the universe for 60 years. Most nights it heard nothing but the whisper of distant stars and the hum of cosmic radiation. Dr. Amara Osi had grown used to the silence. She sat in the control room, her eyes scanning the monitors while rain drummed against the windows outside. It was 3 a.m, and she was tired. Then everything changed. The speakers crackled. A pattern emerged from the noise, clear and deliberate. Amara sat up straight, her exhaustion forgotten. She had spent 15 years searching for exactly this. And now that it was here, she almost didn't believe it. Her hands shook as she began recording. The signal repeated every 47 seconds. It was mathematical at first. Prime numbers arranged in sequences that no natural phenomenon could create. Then came something else. Images, perhaps. Data compressed in ways her equipment struggled to interpret. Amara reached for her phone and called her supervisor. "You need to get here now," she said. "I think someone just said hello." Within hours, the building filled with people. Scientists flew in from around the world. The signal was real. Every radio telescope that pointed toward Tau Ceti confirmed it. Something 12 light-years away was trying to talk to them. The translation took 6 days. Teams worked without sleep, feeding the data through every algorithm they had. The signal contained a primer, a sort of dictionary that taught them how to understand the rest. When the first words finally appeared on the screens, the room fell silent. "We are the Quilnari of the 4th planet of Tau Ceti. Our world burns. We have no weapons, no defenses. The Ravagers have come. If anyone hears this, know that we existed. Know that we tried to survive. Know that we—" The message cut off. Then it started again from the beginning. Amara read it 3 times. Her chest felt tight. Somewhere out there, someone was dying. They had sent this message into the void, probably expecting nothing, hoping for nothing, just wanting someone to know they had lived. The United Nations called an emergency session. Delegates from every nation gathered in New York. The debate lasted for hours. Some said it was a trap. Others argued it might be a hoax, something created by a rival nation to waste resources. A few pointed out that humanity had only just developed faster than light travel. The Alcubierre drive was barely 5 years old. They had used it twice, both times for unmanned probes. "We don't know what's out there," said the Chinese representative. "We could be flying into an ambush." "We don't know anything," countered the Brazilian ambassador. "That's the point. This could be our only chance to prove we're worth something." Ambassador David Okafor from Nigeria stood up. He was old, his hair completely white, but his voice carried through the chamber. "For thousands of years we have asked if we are alone in the universe. We have built machines to listen. We have sent our own messages into space. We have dreamed of the day someone would answer." He paused, looking around the room. Someone answered. "They are dying, and they asked for help. They didn't demand. They didn't threaten. They simply told us they existed and hoped someone would care." He placed his hands on the podium. "What does it say about humanity if we hear that cry and do nothing? What does it say about us if we finally find life in the universe and our first act is to let it die?" The vote took another 6 hours. In the end, 63% of nations agreed. Humanity would respond. Not with warships because they had none. Not with soldiers trained for alien combat because such training didn't exist. They would respond with what they had. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and anyone willing to risk everything for people they had never met. The mission planners gave themselves 3 weeks. 7 ships would make the journey. The largest was the Endeavour, a deep space exploration vessel that had never left Earth's solar system. The others were cargo haulers, mining ships, and 1 passenger transport that had been ferrying people to Mars. None of them were designed for combat. All of them were retrofitted with the new warp drives. Captain Grace Adeyemi was chosen to lead the fleet. She had spent 20 years in space, most of it hauling equipment to lunar colonies. She was practical, calm under pressure, and had a reputation for bringing her crews home alive. When they offered her the position, she asked only one question. "How bad is it?" "We don't know," they told her. The signal stopped transmitting 4 days ago. Either they were silenced or there's no one left to send it. Grace nodded. "Then we better hurry." The ships launched from orbit on a Tuesday morning. Millions of people watched from Earth. Some prayed, others simply hoped. The fleet aligned in formation and then space twisted around them. One moment they were near Earth. The next, they were gone, racing across 12 light years toward a world that might already be dead. Inside the Endeavour, Grace stood on the bridge and looked at her crew. They were afraid. She was afraid too. But fear had never stopped humans before. "We don't know what we're flying into," she said. "We don't know if we can help, but we're going to try because that's what we do." Someone called out for help and we answered. "Let's make sure we're not too late." The stars streaked past. Somewhere ahead a civilization waited. Dead or alive, humanity would find them. And whatever happened next would define who humans were to the rest of the galaxy. The Endeavor pushed forward through the darkness, carrying hope across the impossible distance between worlds. Nishra pressed her feathered hand against the wall of the archive chamber. The stone was cool, ancient, carved by her ancestors 3,000 years ago. Outside, she could hear the city burning. The Ravagers had been methodical in their destruction, moving from district to district, taking what they wanted and destroying the rest. She had perhaps an hour before they reached this building. Maybe less. The Quilnari had never known war. Their history contained conflicts, certainly. Disagreements over resources, debates that sometimes grew heated. But violence on this scale was something they had only encountered in theoretical studies of extinct civilizations. They had no weapons, no army, no concept of organized killing. When the Ravagers arrived 3 months ago, the Quilnari had tried to communicate. They had offered to share their resources, to negotiate, to find peaceful solutions. The Ravagers had responded by taking everything. Nishra activated the recording crystal and began to speak. Someone needed to document this. Even if no one ever found the archive, even if the Quilnari disappeared completely, she would not let them be forgotten. Her voice was steady as she described what had happened, though her feathers trembled. "They came from the outer system without warning," she said. 7 of their harvest ships, each one larger than our biggest orbital station. They demanded we surrender all our resources and populations. We tried to explain that we could share, that there was enough for everyone. They did not listen. She paused, closing her eyes. "Our people are not warriors. We are artists, scientists, philosophers. We built our civilization on the principle that knowledge and cooperation make us stronger than conflict ever could. We were wrong. Or perhaps we were right, but we were alone in that belief." Through the walls she heard screaming. The Ravagers had insect-like bodies, chitinous and efficient. They moved in swarms, communicating through clicks and pheromones. They had technology far beyond what the Quilnari possessed. Energy weapons that could cut through buildings. Ships that moved faster than anything the Quilnari had ever built. And worst of all, they had no interest in communication. Nishra continued recording. She described the cities that had fallen, the populations that had been taken to the harvest ships never to return, the way her people had tried to hide in the wilderness, in underground shelters, in orbital stations. The Ravagers had found them all. They were efficient hunters, and the Quilnari were easy prey. Council leader Theron found her an hour later. He was old, his feathers gray with age, and he moved slowly. "Nishra," he said, "we need you in the emergency shelter. The final evacuation is starting. 5 more minutes," she said. "I need to finish this." Theron sat down beside her. "I spoke with Penna this morning." The young scientist, the one who wanted to send the signal. Nishra remembered. 2 weeks ago, as the situation grew desperate, someone had proposed sending a message into space. A distress call. Most of the council had thought it was pointless. The universe was vast and empty. If other civilizations existed, they were probably just as hostile as the Ravagers. Or they were too far away to help. Or they simply wouldn't care. But Penna had been insistent. "We've spent centuries studying the stars," the young scientist had argued. "We've always hoped to find others like us. What if they exist? What if they're listening? What if they're better than the Ravagers?" In the end, they had agreed. Not because they believed it would work, but because they had nothing left to lose. They had sent the signal, pouring all their remaining power into the transmission. They had included everything: their language, their history, their location. A message that said simply, "We are here. We are dying. Please remember us." "And do you think anyone heard it?" Theron asked. Nishra didn't answer right away. She saved her recording and stood up. "I think the universe is very large and very old. I think civilizations have risen and fallen for billions of years, and most of them probably destroyed themselves or each other. I think finding someone who would cross the stars to help strangers is almost impossible." "But," Theron prompted, "but almost impossible is not the same as impossible." She looked at him. And I would rather die hoping than die believing we were truly alone. They made their way to the shelter. It was deep underground, carved into bedrock. 2,000 Quilnari had gathered there, the last survivors of a population that had once numbered in the billions. Children huddled against their parents. Scientists clutched data tablets containing everything they could save. Artists had brought paintings, sculptures, anything to preserve their culture. Penna was there, working on communications equipment. The young scientist looked up as Nishra entered. "I'm still broadcasting," Penna said. "I don't know if anyone can hear it, but I'm broadcasting our location, our situation, everything." "Good," Nishra said. "Keep broadcasting until the very end." The shelter shook as something exploded above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. A child started crying, and her mother held her close, singing softly. It was an old song, one that Quilnari parents had sung to their children for generations. A song about hope and the future. Nishra sat down and opened her recording crystal one last time. "If you are reading this," she said, "then we are gone. The Ravagers took everything. Our cities, our people, our future. But they could not take what we were. We were curious. We were kind. We built beautiful things and asked difficult questions. We looked at the stars and dreamed of friends we might never meet." She paused. "I hope someone hears this. I hope someone knows we existed. I hope the universe is not only full of Ravagers and their victims. I hope somewhere out there someone is better than this." Above them, the Ravagers landed their ships. They began cutting through the layers of rock and metal. Penna kept broadcasting. The parents kept singing to their children, and Nishra closed her eyes, holding on to hope even as the ceiling began to crack. The universe was vast. Maybe somewhere in that vastness someone had heard them. Maybe someone cared. It was a foolish hope. But it was all they had left. Space twisted and folded. 7 human ships dropped out of warp at the edge of the Tau Ceti system, their hulls still glowing from the journey. Grace Adeyemi felt her stomach settle as normal physics reasserted themselves. The voyage had taken 3 weeks, 3 weeks of hoping they weren't too late. One look at the sensors told her they might be. "Report," she said. Chief Engineer Raymond Kowalski studied his screens. "I'm reading multiple large vessels in orbit around the 4th planet. They're not broadcasting any identification. Energy signatures are consistent with weapons charging." "Life signs?" Grace asked. Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked her console, adjusting the sensors. "Faint readings from the surface. Underground mostly. There are definitely survivors, but not many. I'm also detecting massive environmental damage. Whatever happened here, it's been going on for a while." Grace pulled up the visual feed. Tau Ceti 4 hung in space ahead of them, a blue and green world that reminded her of Earth. Except the greens were wrong, more purple than anything. And there were dark scars across the continents. Cities burned, massive ships hung in orbit like predators circling wounded prey. "Those must be the Ravagers," she said. "They're big," Raymond said. His voice was calm, but Grace heard the worry underneath. "Our ships are equipped for mining and transport. Those things are built for war." Grace nodded. She had known this might happen. They all had. But knowing something in theory and seeing it in reality were very different things. Her small fleet of retrofitted civilian ships faced a force that could probably destroy them without much effort. They had mining lasers that could cut metal, magnetic grapples meant for capturing asteroids, and determination. Against actual warships, that didn't seem like much. "Options?" she asked. "We could leave," said her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Hassan. "Report back to Earth, come back with a real military force. By the time we get back, everyone down there will be dead," Grace said. "If they're not already." "Then we need to be smart," Raymond said. "We can't win a straight fight." "So we don't fight straight?" Grace smiled. "I'm listening." They spent the next hour planning. The Ravager ships were powerful, but they were also occupied. Their smaller craft were moving back and forth between the surface and the harvest ships carrying cargo. The Ravagers seemed confident that no threat would come. They weren't even running defensive patrols. "Arrogant," Yuki said. "They're used to being the biggest predators around." "Then let's teach them something new," Grace said. The human fleet split up. 3 ships moved to create a debris field using mining charges. They shattered asteroids into clouds of metal fragments, creating obstacles that would limit the Ravagers' mobility. 2 more ships positioned themselves near the planet's upper atmosphere, ready to deploy electromagnetic pulse devices. The Santiago, a fast transport ship, prepared for a surface landing. and the Endeavor moved forward, broadcasting on every frequency they could manage. Grace had worked with linguists on Earth to adapt the Quilnari signal into something resembling a universal message. She didn't know if the Ravagers would understand it. She didn't particularly care. The message was simple. This world is under protection. Withdraw immediately or face consequences. The Ravager response came quickly. Their ships powered weapons and turned toward the human fleet. Grace watched the energy signatures spike on her sensors. They were preparing to fire. All ships execute Maneuver Delta, she said. Let's show them we're not easy targets. The human ships scattered. They were smaller and more maneuverable than the Ravager vessels. They used the debris field they had created, weaving between the fragments. When the Ravagers fired, their energy beams struck asteroids instead of ships. The explosions lit up space. Deploy EMP charges, Grace ordered. The charges flew toward the smaller Ravager craft. When they detonated, electromagnetic pulses washed over the raiders. Their systems flickered and failed. Some went dead in space. Others tumbled out of control. It wasn't permanent, but it bought time. Santiago is making her approach, Hassan reported. Grace switched to that camera feed. The Santiago dove through the atmosphere, her hull glowing with friction heat. Lieutenant Carmen Silva was piloting, threading through ground fire and debris. The ship shook and rattled, but Carmen held her course. She had spent years flying cargo runs in the asteroid belt. This was just another dangerous landing to her. The Santiago touched down near the largest life sign concentration. Carmen and her team rushed out wearing heavy excavation suits. They carried cutting tools, medical supplies, and portable shields. Not weapons. They had some small arms, but Grace had been clear. This was a rescue mission, not an invasion. Carmen reached the shelter entrance. The Ravagers had been working to break through, but the human arrival had pulled their attention away. The door was damaged, sparking and bent. Carmen's team began cutting through. Almost there, she radioed. I'm reading life signs on the other side. Hurry, Grace said. We can't hold the Ravagers off forever. The door fell away. Carmen stepped through into darkness. She activated her suit lights. Hundreds of faces stared back at her. They were bird-like beings, covered in feathers that ranged from purple to green to gold. They looked terrified. They were pressed together in the back of the shelter, protecting their children. One of them stepped forward. Young, with bright blue feathers and wide eyes. This one held a small device, some kind of translator. Please, the device said, translating the Quilnari's words. Please don't hurt us. Carmen removed her helmet. She wanted them to see her face, to see that she was real. We're not here to hurt you, she said. We heard your message. We came to help. The young Quilnari stared at her. You came, but you're not even from this system. Why would you come? Carmen smiled. Because you asked. That's enough. The Quilnari's legs gave out. The being sat down hard, feathers trembling. You answered. Someone actually answered. We did, Carmen said. And we're going to get you out of here. All of you. Can you help me organize an evacuation? The young scientist nodded, standing on shaking legs. Yes, I can do that. My name is Penna. Carmen Silva, she said. Nice to meet you, Penna. Now let's move fast. My captain is buying us time, but we need to use it well. Above, in orbit, Grace watched her sensors. The Ravagers were regrouping. They had been surprised, but surprise wouldn't last forever. Soon they would realize the humans couldn't actually stop them. Soon they would attack in force, but for now, people were being saved. For now, the Quilnari were being carried to safety. And for now, that was enough. Grace keyed her communication system. All ships, hold the line. We're not leaving without them. Her crew responded with determination. They had traveled 12 light years for this. They weren't backing down now. Swarm leader Craxus watched the strange ships with growing confusion. In 300 cycles, the Ravagers had conquered 47 worlds. They had perfected the art of harvesting. Find a weak civilization, overwhelm them quickly, take their resources and populations, then move on. It was efficient. It was profitable. And it always worked until now. These newcomers made no sense. They had arrived in ships that were clearly not military vessels. Their weapons were improvised, weak. Yet they had positioned themselves between the Ravagers and their prey. They had disabled several raider craft, and they had landed on the surface to extract survivors. What are they? Craxus clicked to his second unknown species. They broadcast a warning, then attacked when we didn't retreat. They protect the Quilnari, Craxus said. Why? The bird people have no value to them. No trade agreements. No alliance. They cannot even be from the same region of space. His second had no answer. Craxus analyzed the tactical situation. He could destroy these newcomers easily. Their ships were fragile. A sustained bombardment would crack them open. But there was something strange about their behavior. They didn't fight like prey, running and hiding. They didn't fight like predators seeking dominance and territory. They fought like something else entirely. Something protecting something valuable. Send a transmission, Craxus ordered. Tell them to release our captured scouts and leave. If they refuse, we will destroy the planet from orbit. It was not an empty threat. The Ravagers had the firepower to crack continental shelves. They rarely used it because dead worlds yielded nothing. But these newcomers needed to understand the cost of interference. The response came quickly. Negative. Withdraw your forces or we will continue to resist. Craxus felt something close to anger. These weak creatures dared to refuse? He gave the order to target the planet. Power built in the massive orbital cannons. One shot would trigger earthquakes across the surface. The Quilnari would die, and the newcomers would see the price of their defiance. But before he could fire, the newcomer ships moved. They repositioned themselves in a perfect sphere around the planet. Every single vessel placed itself directly in the line of fire. The message was clear. To strike the world, the Ravagers would have to go through them first. They're bluffing, his second said. They cannot survive our weapons. I know, Craxus said. But he didn't give the order to fire, because the newcomers weren't bluffing. They knew they would die. They were doing it anyway. In 300 cycles, Craxus had never encountered behavior like this. Prey ran. Predators fought for resources, but these creatures were willingly dying for strangers. It made no strategic sense. It was unpredictable. And unpredictability was dangerous. On the surface, Carmen worked frantically to evacuate the Quilnari. The shelter held 2,000 individuals. Her ship could carry maybe 300 at a time. The math was brutal. We need more ships down here, she radioed to Grace. I can't spare them. The Ravagers are about to attack in force. If I pull ships away from the orbital defense, we all die. Carmen looked at Penna. The young scientist was helping organize the evacuation, prioritizing the injured and the young. How fast can your people move? Not fast enough, Penna said. The translator struggled with the emotion in the Quilnari's voice. There are children, elderly, wounded. We cannot leave them. We won't, Carmen said. But we need to think creatively. She studied her surroundings. The shelter was large with multiple chambers. The Quilnari had built it well. Strong walls, independent life support, emergency power. It was designed to survive disasters. Can this shelter be moved? Carmen asked. Penna looked confused. Moved? It weighs thousands of tons. On Earth, we have machines that can move mountains, Carmen said. I have magnetic grapples on my ship rated for asteroids. If we can attach them to structural points, we might be able to lift the whole shelter. That's insane, Penna said. Yeah, Carmen agreed. But we're fresh out of sane options. They worked together, human and Quilnari. Penna identified the shelter's load-bearing structures. Carmen's team attached grapple points. It was a desperate plan, something that had never been attempted. But desperation bred creativity. Above, Grace saw her sensors light up with warnings. The Ravager ships were forming an attack pattern. This was it, the moment when they would discover if human determination could overcome superior firepower. All ships, power everything you have into forward shields, she ordered. Engineering, give me everything we can throw at them. Raymond's voice came through. Captain, we're not warships. We're mining vessels and cargo haulers. We don't have the weapons for this. Then we use what we have, Grace said. Target their sensors with our lasers. Blind them. Deploy every piece of debris we can throw. Make them work for every meter. The battle began. Ravager energy weapons struck the human shields. The Endeavor shook. Hull plates buckled. Alarms screamed. But Grace's crew held their positions. They fired back with everything they had. Mining lasers cut into Ravager armor. Debris clouds forced the enemy ships to maneuver. It wasn't enough to win, but it was enough to slow them down. Hull breach on Deck 7, Hassan reported. Sealing emergency bulkheads. Keep us in position, Grace said. Her knuckles were white on her chair's armrest. A cargo hauler, the Vancouver, took a direct hit. Her shield collapsed. For a horrible moment, Grace thought they had lost her. But the Vancouver's captain, an old woman named Patricia, kept her ship moving. Still here, Patricia radioed. but I'm out of shield power. Going to manual evasion. The Vancouver began a chaotic dance, twisting and rolling to avoid incoming fire. She was designed for hauling freight, not combat maneuvers. But Patricia had spent 40 years in space, and she made the unwieldy ship move like a fighter. On the surface, Carmen's plan was working. The Santiago's grapples locked onto the shelter. The ship's engines roared. Metal groaned. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then impossibly, the shelter began to lift. "We're moving," Penna shouted. "It's actually working." The Santiago rose slowly, carrying the entire shelter beneath it like a massive cargo container. Inside, the Quilnari held on to each other as their world shifted and shook. Children cried. Adults sang to keep everyone calm. And somewhere in the chaos, Nishra whispered a prayer of thanks to whatever forces had sent these impossible strangers. The Santiago climbed toward orbit, straining under the weight. Grace saw it on her sensors and felt hope surge through her. All ships cover the Santiago. Get those people to safety. Her fleet moved to protect the transport. They had come to save lives. And against impossible odds, they were doing it. But the battle wasn't over. The Ravagers were regrouping, and Craxus, watching from his flagship, made a decision. These newcomers had proven they weren't bluffing. They would die for the Quilnari. That changed everything. The Freetown was a cargo hauler built 60 years ago. She had transported grain to Mars colonies, water ice to orbital stations, and prefabricated buildings to lunar settlements. She was slow, ugly, and reliable. Her captain, an old man named Robert Chen, had never expected to die in her. Now he was preparing to do exactly that. "Crew to escape pods," he ordered. "You have 90 seconds. "Captain, we can still fight," his first mate protested. "We're a cargo hauler facing warships," Robert said calmly. "But we're a very heavy cargo hauler. Now go." He watched his crew evacuate. 12 people, most of them young. They had volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. He was proud of every one of them. When the last pod launched, Robert sealed the bridge and changed course. The Endeavour was taking heavy fire. Her shields were failing. Grace was running out of options. Then Robert's voice came through her communication system. "Captain Adeyemi, this is the Freetown. I'm going to buy you some time. Make it count." "Robert, what are you doing?" "Something stupid," he said. "Tell my daughter I love her." The Freetown's engines roared to full power. The massive ship accelerated toward the largest Ravager cruiser. Robert had spent his life learning how to pilot heavy vessels through tight spaces. He knew exactly how much force the Freetown could deliver. The Ravagers noticed too late. They tried to maneuver, but capital ships didn't turn quickly. The Freetown struck them amidships, her massive bulk punching through shields and armor. Both ships crumpled from the impact. The Freetown's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a new sun. When the light faded, the Ravager cruiser was crippled and drifting. The Freetown was gone, but Grace's sensors showed 12 escape pods racing toward the Endeavour. "Get those pods aboard," she ordered. Her voice was rough. "Quickly." The sacrifice gave them breathing room, but not victory. The Ravagers still outnumbered them. Grace needed something else, something the Ravagers wouldn't expect. Yuki had been working at her station, analyzing Quilnari technology from the data they were receiving from the surface. "Captain," she said, "I'm reading power signatures from the planet. Old ones. The Quilnari have orbital defense satellites, built for meteor protection, not warfare, but they're still active. Can we access them? Not without Quilnari help." Grace opened a channel to Carmen's ship. "Get me in contact with the Quilnari leaders now." Penna's voice came through moments later. "I'm here. What do you need?" "Your planet has defensive satellites. Can you activate them?" There was a pause. "Those systems are thousands of years old. We stopped maintaining them centuries ago. Can you activate them?" Grace asked again. I think so. If someone feeds me your tactical data, I can try to link the satellites to your network. But I'm a scientist, not a military coordinator." "You're smart and you're desperate," Grace said. "That's enough. We'll guide you through it." Working together across the chaos of battle, humans and Quilnari created something neither could have achieved alone. Yuki translated the human tactical systems into something Penna could understand. Penna navigated ancient Quilnari security protocols, and slowly the satellites came online. They were primitive by modern standards. Simple magnetic accelerators designed to deflect asteroids, but there were hundreds of them. positioned in a web around the planet, and accelerators didn't care what they were throwing. "Target the smaller Ravager ships," Grace said. "Disable them, don't destroy them." "We're not murderers," the satellites fired. Metal projectiles, nothing more than refined iron, shot through space at tremendous speeds. They struck Ravager raider craft, punching through engines and weapon systems. Ships went dead in space, their crews unharmed but helpless. Craxus watched his fleet fall apart. His raiders were disabled. His cruiser was crippled. The newcomers had somehow turned the planet's own defenses against him. This was supposed to be a simple harvest. It had become a disaster. "Swarm leader," his second said. "We've lost 40% of our raiding force. The harvest ships are vulnerable. We should retreat. Retreat." Craxus had never retreated. The Ravagers didn't retreat. The prey has allies now. Strong allies. Unpredictable allies. This world is no longer worth the cost. Craxus analyzed the situation with cold logic. They could still win. But victory would cost ships resources, time. The harvest from this world wouldn't cover the losses. And these newcomers had proven they would fight to the death. Every victory would be expensive. "Calculate the profit margin," he ordered. The numbers came back negative. For the first time in Ravager history, a raid was costing more than it gained. "Signal the fleet," Craxus said. His mandibles clicked in what might have been frustration. "We're withdrawing. The Council will not be pleased." "The Council values profit," Craxus said. "There is no profit here. Only cost." The Ravager ships began pulling back. They collected their disabled craft, dragging them into the harvest ships' hangar bays. It was a slow, organized retreat. Not a rout, but definitely a retreat. On the Endeavor, Grace watched her sensors in disbelief. "They're leaving." "Confirming," Hassan said. "Ravager ships are moving out of orbit. They're heading for the system's edge." A cheer erupted on the bridge. People hugged each other. Someone was crying. Grace felt her hands shaking. They had done it. Against every logical expectation, they had actually done it. "All ship, status report," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The reports came in. The fleet was battered. Every ship had taken damage. The Freetown was gone, though her crew had survived. But they were alive. And more importantly, so were the Quilnari. Carmen's voice came through. "Captain, the Quilnari are safe. All 2,000 of them. They want to thank you personally." "Tell them we'll talk soon," Grace said. "Right now I need to make sure my ships don't fall apart." She looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted, injured, but grinning. They had traveled 12 light years to answer a distress call. They had fought a battle they couldn't win. And somehow, impossibly, they had won anyway. "Good work, everyone," she said. "Let's bring our people home." Above Tau Ceti 4, human ships held position. They were battered and scarred, but they were still there, still protecting, still standing between the Quilnari and harm. And throughout the system, on every communication frequency, both human and Quilnari broadcasters were sending the same message into space, a message that would ripple outward at the speed of light, reaching other worlds, other civilizations. The message was simple. Help came. Someone answered, "We are not alone." In the depths of space, the Ravagers fled, and for the first time in their history, they had learned something new. Some prey fought back, and some strangers crossed the stars to protect them. 3 days after the battle, Nishra stood in what remained of the council chamber. Half the ceiling was gone, exposing the purple sky above. Scorch marks covered the walls, but the chamber still stood, just like the Quilnari themselves. She heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, different from Quilnari feet. She turned and saw the human captain approaching. Grace Adeyemi moved slowly, favoring her left side. She had been injured when her ship took damage, but she had refused to stay in the medical bay. "Elder Nishra," Grace said through the translator device. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "You could never disturb me, Captain," Nishra said. "You saved us. You and your people crossed the impossible distance and saved us." Grace looked uncomfortable. "We did what anyone should do. You called for help. We answered. But we are not anyone," Nishra said softly. "We sent our message believing no one would come, believing that if they did come, they would be just like the Ravagers. You proved us wrong." They walked together through the damaged city. Human engineers worked alongside Quilnari scientists, repairing power systems and water distribution. Carmen Silva was teaching a group of young Quilnari how to use human construction equipment. Penna was showing human doctors how Quilnari medical technology worked. Two species, learning from each other. "Your people are remarkable," Grace said. "Your technology is generations ahead of ours in many ways. The medical scanners alone could save millions of lives on Earth. And your people are remarkable in different ways," Nishra replied. "You improvise, you adapt. You see solutions where we see only problems. Penna told me how you lifted our entire shelter with a cargo ship. No Quilnari would have thought of that." They reached the communications center. It was one of the first buildings the humans had helped repair. Penna was there working with Yuki to establish long-range transmissions. "We're ready," Penna said. "The message is prepared." Grace nodded. "Then let's send it." They had spent 2 days crafting the transmission. It would broadcast on every frequency, in every language they could manage. A message to the galaxy that would travel at light speed, reaching new worlds with every passing year. The message was simple. It told the story of the Quilnari and the humans. It told how a desperate cry for help had been answered by strangers. It told how two species had worked together to drive off a common enemy. And it ended with an invitation. "To all who hear this," the message said, "you are not alone. Help exists. Friendship exists. We are the Quilnari and the humans, and we are here. If you need help, call out. Someone will answer." Penna activated the transmission. The message began its journey into the infinite dark. That evening, the Quilnari held a gathering in the largest remaining plaza. Thousands of them came, those who had survived the Ravagers, and those who had been saved by the humans. They brought food, traditional dishes made from ingredients that grew only on their world. They invited the humans to share their meal. Grace sat with council leader Theron. The old Quilnari looked tired but peaceful. "What will you do now?" Theron asked. "Return to Earth," Grace said. "Report what happened. Probably face a dozen investigations about why I risked so much for strangers." "And what will you tell them?" Grace smiled. "The truth. That we found life in the universe, and it was worth everything we risked. That humanity's first contact could have been with weapons and conquest, but instead it was with open hands and offers of help. That we defined who we are to the galaxy, and I'm proud of what we became." "You gave us more than survival," Theron said. "You gave us hope. Before you came, we thought the universe was cold and hostile. Now we know there is kindness among the stars." Nishra approached, carrying a crystalline data device. She presented it to Grace with ceremony. "This contains everything we are," Nishra said. "Our complete history, our scientific knowledge, our art and music and philosophy, 3,000 years of Quilnari civilization. We give it to you freely." Grace took the crystal carefully. I don't know what to say. This is priceless." "You saved everything we are," Nishra said. "It seems fair that you should have access to it. Learn from us, as we will learn from you. Let our peoples grow together." Grace felt tears in her eyes. She hadn't cried during the battle, but this simple gesture broke through her composure. "We'll treasure this and we'll be back. This isn't goodbye." "No," Theron agreed. "This is only the beginning." Before the human fleet departed, they established a small station in orbit, a monitoring post staffed by both species, a promise to return. A symbol of the bond they had created, Carmen and Penna stood together in the station's observation deck, watching the human ships prepare for departure. "Will you come back?" Penna asked. "Absolutely," Carmen said. "Someone needs to make sure you're using that construction equipment correctly." Penna's feathers ruffled, and what Carmen had learned was Quilnari laughter. "And someone needs to teach you proper scientific methodology. Your approach to problems is chaotic." "Chaotic but effective," Carmen pointed out. They watched in comfortable silence as the Endeavor's engines began to glow. On the bridge, Grace gave the order. "All ships prepare for warp, we're going home." Her crew responded with practiced efficiency. They had left Earth as a desperate rescue mission. They were returning as heroes. But more than that, they were returning as humanity's first ambassadors to the stars. The ships aligned. Space began to fold around them. And in the moment before they jumped, Grace looked back at Tau Ceti 4. A world that had been dying was now healing. A civilization that had faced extinction was now rebuilding. And two species that had been alone in the universe had found each other. "Execute jump," she said. The stars stretched and blurred. The human fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel, carrying news that would change everything. Earth was not alone. Humanity had found friends among the stars, and they had proven something important about who they were. On Tau Ceti 4, the Quilnari watched the sky where the humans had disappeared. Children asked when they would return. Parents promised it would be soon. And in the archives, Nishra made a new entry. "Today marks the beginning of the new calendar," she wrote. "The day after contact. The day after we learned that the universe holds more than predators and prey. Today we learned about humans, a species who heard a stranger's cry and crossed the impossible distance to help. A species who risked everything for people they had never met. A species who taught us that hope is not foolish but fundamental." She paused, choosing her final words carefully. "We are not alone. And the universe is better than we feared. This is the most important discovery in Quilnari history. Not that life exists elsewhere, but that kindness does, that courage does, that somewhere in the vast darkness there are those who will answer when you call." She saved the entry and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were traveling home, and someday soon, they would return. The galaxy had changed. And it had changed because someone heard a cry for help and decided to answer. That was what humans did. And the universe would never be the same. The stars looked different from the bridge of the Pathfinder. Captain Alan Foster stood with his hands behind his back, watching the unfamiliar patterns through the main viewport. After 3 years in deep space, the first human vessel capable of faster-than-light travel had reached Alpha Centauri, humanity's closest stellar neighbor. "All systems nominal, Captain," reported Jane Miller from her station. The young navigation officer's voice held the same mix of exhaustion and excitement they all felt. Alan nodded. "Status of the anomaly?" Science Officer Olivia Martinez looked up from her console. "Still holding position, sir. Definitely artificial, definitely not one of ours." The bridge fell silent. They had detected the object 2 days ago. A small vessel of unknown design that seemed to be observing them. First contact. The moment humanity had wondered about for centuries. "Any response to our messages?" Alan asked. Communications Officer Peter Walsh shook his head. "Nothing yet, sir. I've been broadcasting on all frequencies using the first contact protocol." Alan took a deep breath. Humanity's first steps into the galaxy would define their species for ages to come. The United Earth government had selected the crew of the Pathfinder carefully, the best scientists, diplomats, and military personnel Earth had to offer. Still, nothing could truly prepare them for this moment. "Keep broadcasting. Let's give them time." That's when it happened. A soft chime sounded from Peter's console. "Captain, they're responding." The main screen flickered, and an image appeared. The creature looking back at them was humanoid, but clearly alien. Its skin had a silvery sheen, and 4 large eyes blinked, independently of each other. When it spoke, its mouth moved in strange ways, but the words came through in perfect English. "Greetings, vessel of unknown origin. I am Ambassador Nylara of the Zalarian Diplomatic Corps, representing the Galactic Confederation. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Alan stepped forward. "I am Captain Alan Foster of the Earth vessel Pathfinder. We are explorers from the planet Earth and the Sol system." The alien's 4 eyes widened slightly. "The Sol system? That sector is listed as pre-FTL. Your technology should not be capable of reaching this system." Olivia couldn't help but smile. "We're full of surprises." The ambassador paused, seeming to consider this information. "Your method of achieving faster-than-light travel is unexpected. Our records indicated your species would not achieve this capability for at least another century." Alan smiled. "As my science officer said, we're full of surprises. We look forward to peaceful contact with your Confederation. This is most irregular. The ambassador's tone changed, becoming more formal. I am authorized to establish preliminary diplomatic relations with new species. Request permission to dock with your vessel. Alan looked at Security Chief Greg Wilson, who gave a cautious nod. Permission granted, Ambassador. We'll prepare our docking bay. 3 hours later, Ambassador Nalara sat across from Alan and his senior staff in the Pathfinder's conference room. Diplomatic liaison William Carter had joined them, carefully taking notes on everything the alien said. The Galactic Confederation comprises over 200 species that have achieved interstellar travel, Nalara explained. We have existed for over 10,000 of your Earth years, bringing peace and stability to this sector of the galaxy. And what are the terms for joining this confederation? William asked. New species must demonstrate technological maturity, cultural stability, and adherence to the 3 universal laws. The ambassador's voice took on a sing-song quality, as if reciting from memory. First, no species may interfere with the natural development of pre-FTL civilizations. Second, no species may develop weapons capable of planetary destruction. Third, all disputes must be resolved through Confederation mediation. Alan leaned forward. These laws seem reasonable. What's the process for Earth to join? The ambassador made a sound that might have been a laugh. Most species require centuries of observation before they qualify for even observer status. Your sudden appearance is unprecedented. You have achieved FTL travel through means unknown to us, which raises concerns about your technological development path. Olivia frowned. You mean you're worried because we didn't follow the same path as other species? Precisely. The standard development cycle is well established. Species typically develop antimatter technology, then gravitational manipulation, then finally achieve FTL capability. Your method, using what you call quantum folding, is concerning. It suggests unpredictable development. Alan felt a chill. The ambassador's words were polite, but the message was clear. Humans were not developing the way the Confederation expected or wanted. So where does that leave us? He asked directly. Nylara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Your species may apply for observer status. Perhaps in 100 years you might qualify for provisional membership. The human delegation exchanged glances. 100 years of waiting just to be considered for provisional status. With all due respect, Ambassador, Alan replied with a slight smile. Humans tend to work on a different timetable. We'll see. You and 10. The ambassador's expression changed subtly, a widening of her 4 eyes, a slight shift in posture. It was the first indication that the Confederation had encountered something entirely new. I do not understand, she said slowly. The process cannot be accelerated. It requires careful observation, assessment of your cultural stability, technological integration. We understand the requirements. William cut in smoothly. We simply believe we can meet them more quickly than you anticipate. No species has ever, will be the first, Olivia said with a confident smile. The meeting concluded shortly after, with Nylara returning to her vessel visibly unsettled. As the senior staff watched the Zalarian ship depart from the Pathfinder's viewport, Greg voiced what they were all thinking. I don't think she likes us very much. Alan shrugged. She doesn't know us yet, but she will. He turned to his crew. Send a message to Earth. Tell them we've made first contact with a galactic civilization, and tell them we have work to do. As the Pathfinder turned back toward Earth, carrying news that would forever change human history, Ambassador Nylara was already sending her own message to the Confederation Council. Contact established with unexpected species from Sol system. They call themselves humans. Preliminary assessment. Technological development irregular. Cultural patterns unpredictable. Behavioral responses non-standard. Most concerning observation. When informed of standard integration timeline, they rejected it outright. These humans do not accept limitations. Recommend immediate full assessment. They could be either valuable allies or a significant disruption. to established order. The Confederation was about to learn the first and most important rule about dealing with humans. Never tell them something is impossible. They take it as a challenge. 5 years passed quickly for humanity. The news of first contact had changed Earth forever. Old conflicts seemed small in the face of humanity's new place in the galaxy. Countries pooled resources and progress accelerated at a pace that shocked even humans themselves. Catherine Reeves adjusted her formal blue uniform as she prepared to address the Galactic Confederation. As Earth's first ambassador to the stars, she carried the hopes of billions on her shoulders. "Nervous?" asked her assistant, John Baker, as they waited outside the Grand Chamber aboard the massive space station called Harmony. Catherine smiled. "A little, but we've earned our place here." In just 5 years, humans had established colonies on Mars, Venus, and several moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They had adapted the quantum folding drive to work on smaller vessels, creating a fleet of ships that explored the nearby star systems. Earth had united under a single government for the first time in its history. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. The doors to the chamber opened. Catherine took a deep breath and walked forward. The assembly room was enormous. Hundreds of alien species sat in specialized areas designed for their different body types and atmospheric needs. Some floated in liquid tanks, others perched on gravity plates, and many sat in seats not unlike those humans used. High Counselor Dravax, an ancient being with gray skin that hung in folds from a skeletal frame, spoke first. His voice was deep and seemed to vibrate the air itself. "The Assembly recognizes Ambassador Catherine Reeves of Earth." Catherine stood at the center of the chamber, all eyes on her. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Confederation, I bring greetings from Earth and its colonies." She paused, looking around the room. 5 years ago, our species made first contact with the Confederation. At that time, we were told that becoming even an observer in this body would take a century. Murmurs spread through the chamber as many representatives shifted uncomfortably. Catherine continued, "Today, I formally request that Earth be granted accelerated membership consideration based on our demonstrated progress." The chamber erupted in sounds of protest. High Counselor Dravax raised a hand for silence. "Ambassador Reeves, such a request has no precedent. The 3 laws require demonstrated stability and technological advancement across multiple generations." Catherine nodded respectfully. "We have reviewed your laws carefully. Nowhere do they specify a required time frame." A blue-skinned representative stood up. "This is not how things are done," he exclaimed. "You cannot simply reinterpret our most sacred traditions." "We're not reinterpreting," Catherine replied calmly. "We're innovating. In 5 years, we have achieved what many of your species took centuries to accomplish. We have united our planet, established self-sustaining colonies across our system, and developed technologies that complement Confederation standards." The debate raged for hours. Some representatives were curious about these fast-moving humans. Others were deeply concerned. Through it all, Catherine stood firm, answering questions with confidence and respect. Finally, Dravax called for a recess. "The Assembly will consider Earth's request. Ambassador Reeves, please join the Senior Council for a private discussion." Catherine followed Dravax and 12 other senior representatives to a smaller chamber. Among them was Nylara, the Zilarion, who had first contacted humans. She had been promoted to senior ambassador in the years since. Once the doors closed, the tone changed immediately. "Your species pushes too hard, too fast," Nylara said sharply. "The universe rewards patience." "With respect," replied Dr. Eric Daniels, Earth's leading scientist who had joined Catherine for the private meeting. "Where we come from, the universe rewards those who make their own opportunities." An amphibious representative gurgled something that the translator converted. "What happens when you make a mistake at such speeds? The consequences could affect us all." Catherine leaned forward. "We understand your concerns, but consider what we bring to the Confederation. New perspectives, fresh approaches to old problems." Nylara's 4 eyes narrowed. "Perhaps a demonstration is in order." She looked at her fellow council members who nodded in agreement. if humans wish to join. So quickly you must prove yourselves. She touched a control panel and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a rocky planet orbiting a red star. Proxima Centauri b, Nylara explained. The closest exoplanet to your home system. Dr. Daniels nodded. We've begun preliminary surveys there. Then you know it's uninhabitable, said Dravax. Toxic atmosphere, extreme radiation, unstable geological conditions. Catherine frowned. We've found it challenging, yes. The Krell species attempted to terraform this world for 300 years before abandoning the effort, Nylara said, pointing to a gray-skinned representative with 6 arms. Their technology was far beyond yours. They declared it impossible. The room fell silent as the humans realized what was happening. This is your challenge, Dravax rumbled. Establish a self-sustaining colony on Proxima Centauri b within 5 years. Not an outpost, not a research station, a true colony with at least 5,000 permanent residents. If you succeed, the Assembly will consider your petition for a full membership. Catherine and Eric exchanged glances. The task was enormous. Earth's terraforming technology was in its infancy, but they both knew what the answer had to be. We accept your challenge, Catherine said firmly. The council members seemed surprised. They had expected debate, requests for more time, or even a refusal. You understand the difficulty? Asked Nylara. Many would say this is impossible. Humans have a different relationship with impossible things than most species seem to, Catherine replied with a slight smile. As they walked back to their ship, Eric whispered worriedly. 5 years is not much time for such a massive project. Catherine smiled at her colleagues. 5 years? We can do it in 3. Word of the challenge spread quickly across Earth and its colonies. Some citizens questioned the wisdom of accepting such a difficult task. Others saw it as humanity's chance to prove itself. Within weeks, the Proxima Project was formed. The best scientists, engineers, and volunteers from around the solar system signed up. Equipment and resources that had been earmarked for Mars and Venus were redirected. New ship designs were created specifically to support the colonization effort. As the first construction ships departed for Proxima Centauri, Nylara sent a private message to the Confederation Council. The humans have accepted the challenge without hesitation. They speak of completing it in less time than allotted. I believe they will fail, but I have observed a troubling pattern in human behavior. They seem to work harder when faced with failure. We must be prepared for either outcome. If they somehow succeed, the Confederation will never be the same. What the Confederation didn't understand yet was that humans never saw the impossible as a barrier. They saw it as a starting line. The surface of Proxima Centauri b was not welcoming. Fierce storms whipped across the rocky landscape. The atmosphere was thick with toxic gases. Radiation levels were dangerously high, but none of this stopped the human ships from landing. Chief Engineer Samuel Powell stood in the temporary shelter, looking at the holographic map of their planned colony. Around him, dozens of engineers and scientists worked at a frantic pace. The atmospheric readings are worse than we expected, said Grace Chen, the Environmental Systems Director. She pointed to the red areas on her screen. The Krell data was accurate. The compounds in the air break down our processing filters twice as fast as our models predicted. Samuel nodded. He had expected problems. Everyone had. What about the underground approach? Grace smiled. That's looking more promising. The deep scans show stable cavern systems 10 kilometers below the surface. They're naturally shielded from most of the radiation. This was the human advantage. Where the Krell had spent centuries trying to make the planet's surface habitable, the humans had immediately looked for alternatives. If the surface was too hostile, they would build below it. How soon can we begin excavation? Samuel asked. First, drilling teams are already setting up, replied Ben Martinez, the mining operations lead. We should reach the first cavern system within a month. Samuel looked around at his team. They had been on the planet for just 2 weeks, and already the first phase of their plan was ahead of schedule. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the shelter. Red lights flashed. "Radiation spike," someone shouted. "Everyone to the shielded areas." The team moved quickly to the reinforced section of the shelter. These radiation bursts were common and deadly. Their first week on the planet they had lost 2 engineers who hadn't reached shelter in time. As they huddled in the shielded room, Samuel's communication device lit up. It was a message from Earth. "The first colony ships are being prepared," it read. 5,000 volunteers have been selected. Estimated arrival, 8 months. 8 months. They needed to have at least the basic living areas ready by then. It seemed impossible, but Samuel felt a surge of determination. Humans had been doing the impossible since they first climbed down from trees and decided to walk upright. 3 months later, the first cavern system had been converted into a vast underground complex. Artificial lighting mimicked Earth's sun. Air processing systems worked continuously to make the environment breathable. The radiation shielding was holding, but problems kept arising. A tunnel collapse killed 5 workers. Equipment failures were common in the harsh conditions. And the atmospheric processors on the surface, their long-term solution for eventually making the planet livable, kept breaking down. 2 Confederation observers had arrived to monitor their progress. The amphibious alien named Tren seemed genuinely curious about human methods. His partner, a Zalarian named Vex, was clearly skeptical. "Another processor has failed," Vex noted as they watched humans rush to repair the massive machine on the surface. "That's the 3rd this month. Perhaps it's time to reconsider your approach." Samuel, who was guiding the observers on their inspection, shook his head. "We're learning from each failure. The next model will be better." Tren tilted his head. "I don't understand," he said. "You've lost lives, your equipment keeps failing. Why don't you pause to reconsider your approach?" Samuel looked at the alien with surprise. "Pause? We don't have time to pause. We have people arriving in 5 months. Besides, every problem teaches us something new." The observers exchanged glances. Vex spoke quietly to his colleague. "I'm beginning to think that's not how they're wired." Despite the setbacks, the underground colony grew rapidly. The humans named it New Hope. They expanded into 3 connected cavern systems, creating living quarters, hydroponic farms, water recycling facilities, and even recreational areas. 6 months after the project began, disaster struck. A massive earthquake shook the planet. Several tunnels collapsed. The main power system failed. 300 workers were trapped in a distant section of the colony. The Confederation observers expected the humans to finally admit defeat. Instead, they watched in amazement as rescue teams immediately organized and began digging through the collapsed tunnels. "The structural integrity of that entire section is compromised," Vex pointed out to Grace Chen, who was coordinating the rescue. "Your sensors show another quake is likely within days. This rescue attempt could cost more lives than it saves." Grace didn't look up from her screen. "We don't leave our people behind. Ever." For 3 days straight, teams worked in shifts to reach the trapped workers. No one slept for more than a few hours. When the second earthquake hit, they braced and continued. When their equipment failed, they improvised new tools. On the 4th day, they broke through. 287 of the 300 trapped workers were still alive. As the rescued workers were brought to the medical facility, Tren approached Samuel. "Your people did not give up, even when the odds were against them," he said. "Even when logic suggested retreat was wiser." Samuel smiled tiredly. "That's what makes us human." The observers sent their report to the Confederation Council. "The humans have experienced significant setbacks, yet continue their efforts without pause. Their persistence defies conventional risk assessment. They have completed approximately 40% of their colony plan in 6 months, a pace that, while impressive, may be unsustainable given the hostile conditions." 2 weeks later, the first colony ships arrived from Earth, carrying 2,000 settlers. They brought new equipment, fresh supplies, and most importantly, more human determination. Among them was Dr. Lisa Jackson, Earth's leading expert in atmospheric science. She immediately began working on the surface processor problem. "The Krell approach was too direct," she explained to her team. They tried to process the entire atmosphere from the start. We need to work smarter. Her solution was elegant. Instead of trying to transform the toxic atmosphere all at once, they would create protected zones, starting small and gradually expanding. She also brought genetically engineered bacteria that could survive in the harsh environment and slowly convert certain toxic elements into breathable air. By the 8-month mark, the underground colony housed 3,000 people. The first expansion zones on the surface showed promising results. Small dome structures had been built where the atmospheric conditions had been partially improved. More settlers arrived each month. The colony's population reached 4,000, then 4,500. They were ahead of schedule. 10 months after the project began, 2 months earlier than the most optimistic projections, Chief Engineer Powell sent a simple message to the Confederation Assembly. Come see for yourselves. The humans hadn't just met the challenge, they had exceeded it. And they had done it in less than half the time they were given. As Nylara read the message, she felt a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. The species that never quit had proven themselves yet again. The Confederation delegation arrived at Proxima Centauri B with low expectations. Led by High Counselor Dravax, they included representatives from 12 species, including Nylara of the Zilarians. Their ships entered orbit above the harsh planet, instruments scanning the surface. I detect multiple structures on the surface, reported the Tholian science officer, and extensive development below ground. Dravax frowned. How extensive? Far more than should be possible in less than a year, the officer replied, clearly confused by the readings. Their shuttle descended through the toxic atmosphere, protected by advanced shields. As they broke through the cloud layer, they saw the surface installations, dome structures connected by covered walkways, atmospheric processors working steadily, and human workers in protective suits moving about purposefully. The shuttle landed at a designated pad where a human delegation waited to greet them. Colony Governor Ethan Phillips stood at the front, a tall man with a friendly smile. "Welcome to New Hope," he said, as the aliens emerged from their vessel. "We're honored by your visit." Nylara looked around, her 4 eyes taking in everything. "Your message said the colony is complete?" "See for yourself," Ethan replied, gesturing toward a large elevator structure. "This will take us down to the main colony." As the elevator descended, the aliens watched the digital display count down the kilometers. 5 kilometers down, 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers below the surface, the doors opened to reveal a sight none of them had expected. They stood at the edge of what appeared to be a small city. The cavern was enormous, at least 3 kilometers across, with a ceiling that glowed with artificial light that mimicked a blue sky. Buildings of various sizes filled the space. Parks with actual trees and grass created green areas between structures. People walked about, children played, and the busy sounds of a living community filled the air. Population: 5,243, Ethan announced proudly, all living in completely self-sustaining conditions. The delegation was speechless. What the Krell had failed to achieve in 3 centuries, humans had accomplished in less than a year. "This is unexpected," Dravax finally said, his voice carrying a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. Ethan led them on a tour of the colony. They visited the hydroponic farms that produced fresh food, the water reclamation systems that recycled every drop, the medical facilities, schools, and community centers. And these connect to 2 other cavern systems of similar size, Ethan explained. "We have room to grow to 15,000 residents before we need to expand further." "What about the surface?" asked a reptilian delegate. "It remains largely uninhabitable." "For now," agreed Dr. Lisa Jackson, who had joined their tour. "But our atmospheric processors are making steady progress. We've already created several zones where humans can work with minimal protection. In another decade, we project breathable air across 20% of the surface." The delegation was then shown the colony's research center. Here, the true surprise awaited them. The humans hadn't just been building a colony. They had been studying and improving on Confederation technology from the limited examples they'd been allowed to see. We noticed your gravitic stabilizers have a quantum fluctuation issue at high energy states, Dr. Jackson explained casually, showing them a modified version of the device. We fixed that and improved efficiency by about 30%. The delegation stared in shock. The gravitic technology had been perfected over 800 years by multiple Confederation species. Humans had improved it in less than a year. During a private meal with the colony leadership, High Counselor Dravax finally asked the question that had been troubling the Confederation since first contact. How? How do you advance so quickly when other species required centuries for similar achievements? The human leaders exchanged glances. Ethan considered the question carefully before answering. Throughout our history, humans have lived in a state of constant challenge and competition. Unlike many Confederation species that evolved in stable environments, Earth constantly tried to kill us. Our planet has extreme weather, natural disasters, changing climates, and countless diseases. We adapted by never accepting limitations. But the cost, Nilara interrupted, gesturing around. We know you lost lives building this colony. 17 deaths have been recorded. 23, actually. Ethan corrected quietly. Each one mourned deeply. But every person here knew the risks and chose to come anyway. They believed in pushing boundaries. A young officer from the reptilian delegation spoke up. Even when told something is impossible? Ethan smiled. Especially then. Later, as they toured one of the surface domes where plants from Earth were being grown in the partially processed atmosphere, Nilara found herself walking beside Dr. Jackson. I was among those who believed this project would fail, Nilara admitted. I thought your species was reckless, moving too quickly without proper consideration. Dr. Jackson nodded. Many of our own people thought the same. Yet you proved us all wrong, Nilara continued. Not just by succeeding, but by exceeding the requirements. Why push so hard? The Confederation would have granted you more time. That's not how we work, Dr. Jackson replied simply. When humans commit to something, we give everything we have. Half measures aren't in our nature. The delegation spent 3 days examining every aspect of the colony. They tested the life support systems, studied the expanding surface installations, and interviewed residents. They could find no shortcuts, no temporary solutions designed just to pass inspection. The colony was genuinely self-sustaining and built to last for generations. On their final day, Governor Ethan presented the delegation with data crystals containing all their research and improvements. A gift to the Confederation, he said. We believe in sharing knowledge. As the delegation prepared to depart, Dravax spoke privately with Ethan. Your species has accomplished something remarkable here, the ancient alien admitted. The assembly will be significantly impacted by our report. Ethan nodded. We look forward to working with the Confederation as full members. There will be resistance, Dravax warned. Many species fear change, and humans bring much change. We understand, Ethan replied. But we also believe we have much to offer, and much to learn. As their shuttle lifted off, returning to orbit, Nilara looked down at the growing colony. Below, what had seemed like an impossible challenge had instead become a showcase of human potential. She turned to Dravax. They will change everything about the Confederation, won't they? The High Counselor nodded slowly. Yes, and perhaps that is exactly what we need after 10,000 years of stability. The delegation's report to the Confederation Assembly was comprehensive and undeniable. Humans had not only met, but exceeded the challenge. More impressive still was how they had approached the problem differently than any species before them. Where the Krell had tried to transform the planet to suit their needs, humans had adapted themselves to the planet while simultaneously beginning a longer transformation process. Where Confederation species might have methodically solved one problem at a time, humans had tackled everything at once, learning from each failure and quickly adapting. 1 month later, a vote was scheduled. Earth would be considered for full membership in the Galactic Confederation, centuries ahead of the normal timeline. The species that never quit had earned their place among the stars. 1 year after the successful completion of the Proxima Centauri colony, Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Confederation. The vote wasn't unanimous. Several elder species abstained, uncomfortable with the rapid admission of such an unpredictable newcomer. But the majority recognized the value humans could bring to their ancient organization. The formal ceremony took place aboard the Harmony Station. Ambassador Catherine Reeves stood proudly as the Earth flag was added to the hundreds already displayed in the Great Assembly Hall. "Today marks a historic moment," announced High Counselor Dravax. "We welcome the people of Earth as the 212th member of the Galactic Confederation." As Catherine accepted the official membership crystal, she thought of how far humanity had come in such a short time, from a single planet to a recognized galactic civilization in less than a decade. "We are honored to join you," she said to the Assembly, "and we look forward to contributing to the greater good of all species." Those weren't empty words. In the months that followed, human diplomatic teams, engineers, and scientists spread throughout Confederation space. They brought their unique perspectives to challenges that had once seemed unsolvable. On the water world of Aquarius Prime, human engineers helped design underwater cities that could withstand the planet's massive tidal forces, a problem the native species had struggled with for generations. In the Tholian medical academies, human doctors introduced new treatment approaches that saved countless lives. Even the Krell, who had failed to terraform Proxima Centauri b, requested human assistance with several of their struggling colony worlds. Not everyone welcomed the changes humans brought. Some species found them too direct, too willing to take risks, too quick to challenge established ways. But even the critics couldn't deny the results. 5 years after humanity's admission to the Confederation, an emergency session of the Assembly was called. The mood was somber as representatives gathered. "The Devourer swarm has breached the outer defensive perimeter," Dravax announced to the shocked delegates. 3 worlds in the Antares sector have already been lost. The Devourer swarm was the stuff of nightmares, a non-sentient but highly adaptive biological entity that consumed everything in its path. For centuries, the Confederation had maintained a policy of containment, focusing on keeping the swarm at the edges of known space. "Our standard defenses have failed," continued Dravax. "The swarm has evolved to counter our technology. At its current rate of expansion, it will reach the core worlds within 2 years. Fear filled the assembly chamber. Species that had known peace for thousands of years now faced an existential threat. "What are our options?" asked the Zalarian representative. The Confederation's military council, led by Admiral Krell of the Tholian fleet, presented their assessment. "Continued containment is no longer viable. We recommend evacuation of the threatened sectors and establishment of a new defensive line closer to the core systems. This would mean abandoning dozens of worlds and billions of lives." The Assembly erupted in desperate debate. In the midst of this chaos, a human woman stood and requested to speak. Admiral Sofia Rivera, of the newly formed Human Defense Fleet, was relatively unknown to most delegates. The Assembly fell silent more out of courtesy than expectation. "The Confederation has been fighting the swarm the wrong way," she began bluntly. "Containment was always going to fail eventually. The swarm adapts, it learns. Every defensive line we create just teaches it how to overcome the next one." The military representatives bristled at her criticism, but Rivera continued. "We've studied the data from every swarm encounter for the past 5 centuries. We've identified a pattern. The swarm isn't just a mindless mass. It has a central intelligence, a controlling node that directs its evolution." She activated a holographic display showing the swarm's movement patterns across centuries. "Here," she pointed to a location, deep within swarm territory. "This is the node. Destroy it, and the swarm loses its ability to adapt and coordinate." The Tholian admiral scoffed. "If such a node exists, it would be impossible to reach. Any fleet would be consumed long before it penetrated that far into swarm territory." Rivera nodded. "Using conventional approaches, yes. That's why we're proposing an unconventional solution." She outlined a plan that made the Assembly gasp. A small, fast strike force would penetrate deep into swarm territory using a modified version of Earth's quantum folding drive. They would deliver a newly developed weapon directly to the node and destroy it. "This is madness," protested the Tholian representative. "The statistical probability of success is negligible." Rivera's response echoed through the chamber. "Never. Tell humans the odds." Despite the objections, the assembly had no better options. With reluctant approval, the mission was authorized. A coalition fleet was assembled, led by human strategists but including ships and personnel from 12 species. The mission suffered heavy losses. Of the 20 ships that entered swarm territory, only 7 returned. But they returned victorious. The central node had been destroyed, and across Confederation space, the swarm entities fell into disarray, becoming easy targets for cleanup operations. In the aftermath, as reconstruction began on the damaged worlds, the Confederation Assembly convened a special session. High Counselor Dravax, who had come to understand humans better than most, addressed the gathered representatives. For 10,000 years, the Confederation has brought peace and stability to this sector of the galaxy. We have achieved this through careful deliberation, consensus, and adherence to proven methods. He paused, looking at the human delegation. The arrival of humanity has challenged our most fundamental assumptions. They move quickly, they take risks, they refuse to accept limitations. At first, many of us saw these traits as dangerous. Now we see they can also be our salvation. Dravax proposed an amendment to the Confederation's founding document. After much debate, it passed with a narrow majority. And so, preceding the original 3 universal laws, a new principle was added. The first universal law: never challenge humans, for they never quit. In their persistence lies both peril and promise. Ambassador Reeves, attending her final assembly before retirement, smiled as the new law was formally adopted. Beside her, Nylara, who had become, against all expectations, a close friend, leaned over. "Your species has changed everything," the Zalarian whispered. "That's what we do," Reeves replied simply. "It's who we are." As human ships ventured further into unexplored space, as colonies flourished on worlds once thought uninhabitable, as innovations spread throughout Confederation society, the elder species watched with a mixture of concern and growing respect. They had learned an important lesson. In a universe full of wonders and dangers, sometimes the most valuable trait is simply refusing to give up. On 1,000 worlds, beings of all descriptions began to understand what it meant to have humans as allies, beings who looked at the impossible not as a barrier, but as a challenge. A species who, faced with defeat, would try again, and again, and again. A species who never, ever quit. On Earth, children were still taught the old stories of how humans had climbed the highest mountains, dived to the deepest ocean trenches, and eventually reached for the stars. But now they learned a new chapter in human history, how their determination had earned them not just a place in the galaxy, but a law named in their honor. The first universal law stood as both a warning and a promise to the cosmos. Wherever humans went, the impossible would not remain impossible for long.